Okay, it looks like we are live. Hello, people. I will say hello in the chat. Great. Welcome to class. Don't know what that's up. What that's about. Alright, let's see. Anybody watching? One viewer. Is that me? Perhaps I should look into the health of the stream. How you doing there, stream? We're live! Yeah. Perhaps I should look into the health of the stream. How you doing there, stream? Yay! It works. Okay. So we are a couple of minutes early here. Now, one thing I want to check before we get started. Did that mute me? Am I muted? Am I muted? Let's find out. Come on. Stupid thumbpad reader. Yeah, let's test it. Muted. Am I muted? Am I muted? Oh. Hello, Melissa. Yeah, let's test it. Yay. Muted. Am I muted? Am I muted? Okay, it works. Hello, Melissa. Alright. Am I able to see the chat on this? I can see it on my screen, I guess. Max Ray. Max Ray? I can't tell from your profile picture. It's so tiny. Alright, great. I would love to see my chat. Let's see. How does one see the chat? It's on my desktop. Alright, are we ready to get started? Yes, we are. Great. So all I'm going to do with you today is show you a demo about ink washing. We are going to have a Dropbox. I'm going to deal with that with the rest of class today after I'm done speaking to you and after I show you the demo. Oh, hello, Skylar. We'll talk about that. But since we're going to be submitting a lot of image files, I think it's important for us to talk about editing photos. Now, I am personally able to get Photoshop for free through school. Are you guys able to as well? Let's go over that process. So you just search for Adobe Creative Cloud. Whoopsie. Yeah, how does one spell Adobe Creative Cloud? Let's see if anybody's answered that question. Does anybody know if you guys are able to get Adobe Creative Cloud for free through school? I'm going to go through the process as if you are. Alright, so here we are, Adobe Creative Cloud. You would then sign in. With what? With your UCO credentials. with your UCO website or email address. Oh, no. What is wrong with me? Not yahoo.com. UCO. co.edu. And then brings us to UCO's logon screen. You see how that works? Hopefully you guys are able to break in and nab it. Oh, I've updated my password. Yay! And now I'm in. Now I go to download somewhere. Okay, go up to the apps menu here. I don't think this is right. Support, downloads, download and install. There we go. And take your pick. Take your pick. It's all for free. I personally love Premiere Pro. That's a video editing program, but go ahead, download what you need. So once you get your hands on Photoshop, yep, you're gonna get it for free. Great. So download that, and then open her up. Let's see what kind of junk I have to pick choice. Oh, here's a crappy old photo I can shop. Alright, so let's open this one up. It looks very dull. Needs some contrast, needs some saturation. Alright, so I like to use levels. Now, shoot, this is hard. Let's find a better analogy. Let's see. We'll just use this as if we took a picture. What are you doing? Stab it. As if we took a picture of a painting and we want to crop it and even it out. Now this isn't in color. We're going to have to pull out another photo for that. But using levels is the way I prefer to do brightness and contrast. The keystroke for that is Control L or Command L on Mac. But when in doubt, you can find all your editing tools in the image menu and the adjustments category. So that would be levels here. See, keystroke Control L. The reason I like levels is because you can see all your values right here. You see we have a gap in the histogram right there. That's the difference between the extreme white of the sky and maybe the muted white of the mural. So one way for us to figure out what values are which is to take the gamma slider or the middle tone slider and drag it all the way to the extreme end. Then when I grab the highlight slider, we're seeing a really intense breakdown of the values. Now we don't want to clip out the values in our painting, so we're not going to want to see this much actual white in our painting itself. We're going to want just the first sign of values, like maybe like that. We'll keep it like that. And then do the same thing for the shadows slider. You do want some presence of true black in the image, not in the background around it. So we don't want to clip too many values here, so maybe that's good right there. And once you adjust your core shadow and your highlight slider, you can bring your gamma slider back to 1. That looks pretty good, but if we need to adjust the brightness, that's when you would do that. So you adjust your contrast with the shadow and highlight slider, you adjust your brightness with the gamma slider. Make sense? This way we can make sure we're not clipping out any values, not losing any values. So that's how you adjust the contrast of your paintings. You can also adjust your color balance in levels as well. Let me show you how to do that. There's another way to do color balance. The alternate and labor intensive way is to finish with your values or your contrast here in levels and then go to color balance here, Control B. Notice we also have middle tones, highlights, and shadow section category for each of these. So then you would go through each color channel, feeling out the best balance between red and cyan, between green and magenta. Stop whenever things look grayest. I know that doesn't quite make sense, but you don't want it to look too magenta, you don't want it to look too green, so whatever looks most neutral between those two extremes, that's where you want to be. Now, oftentimes, we only need to fiddle with our midtones, but if you really wanted to get OCD about it, you could also change the color balance of your highlights and your shadows. See, nice and clean and crisp. You want your whites to feel like a neutral white. You don't want, you know, a strong hue to your highlights. That is the exact opposite of what I would tell you if you were in painting, but this is photography. And we're going for white balance, right? But I don't like it that way. I like to nip it in the bud with levels, get all my adjusting done in levels alone. Let's check the questions. Wow. All right, guys. Yeah, go ahead and chat amongst yourselves, but that also makes it hard for me to see if there's any. Maybe you can @ Steve with your comment. Otherwise, just leave your chats plain like this if you're chatting with each other. Okay. Even with longing in, it says we only get the, ooh, that sucks. If that's true, if you can only get a 7-day trial, anybody else tried? Anybody else have any different results? Say so in the comments if that's true. Sorry to hear that. But if you have Photoshop, that's the best way to handle it. I don't know of any. What are the free options? Does anybody know of any free photography? Let's see. Go to your email and look for the Photoshop email from UCO. Cool. Okay. So Skylar says that you gotta just confirm an email before it'll let you go. Okay. On with the shoe. So let's do some color balance now. Let's go back to this dull photo. Where's my Photoshop? Now, this has always annoyed me about Photoshop, but whenever you're bringing in a new file, you want to open it. If you're dragging and dropping, you got to drop it into this bar here. If you drop it in over the workspace here, it's going to insert it into the artboard you're working on. We don't want that. So it's got to be dropped right. Yeah. All right, let's go back to levels. Now, rather than beginning with the RGB channel, which is the brightness and contrast, we're going to break it down channel by channel. So it's done exactly the same way as adjusting your brightness and contrast. You can see your slider or your histogram here. And the idea is you want to bring your highlight right up to the edge of that histogram. But I like to be safe. I like to bring my middle tone slider all the way to the edge. And your first sign of true red, see, in the sky there, you don't want to go any further than that. I already know that this triangle here is going to be flat white, so we can let that go. All right, let's do the same thing. You can see already there's some black traces down there, so we might want to leave we're going to want to leave the shadow slider where it's at. And then you want to find the best color balance, the best white balance between cyan and red here. So what you're doing is color balancing the red channel, but you're also saturating it at the same time. Those are the three things you need. Okay, I take that back. Since we're only working in black and white in this drawing class, we don't need to worry about color. But if this was a color photo that you were working on, there's three things you gotta adjust. You gotta adjust the values of the contrast, you gotta adjust the color balance or the white balance, and you gotta adjust the saturation or how bright your colors are. That's why I like using levels. It's an easy way to do all three at once. What is going on? No, middle slider. Why are you being a... There we go. All right, again, we don't want too much flat white. We don't want too much flat black, so that's good where it's out. And then adjust the white balance between magenta and green. Finally, in the blue channel, see we're going to lose quite a bit here. Yeah, you see it's already clipped out white up there, so I'm not going to want to move my blue slider, and we still have those traces of black down here. So the only thing I'm going to want to do with my blue slider is kind of dial out the white balance. That still looks a little dull, so let's see what happens if we kill that far channel and bring the slider right up to here. That does saturate it a bit more. And I think maybe our red could be adjusted a little better. No? Well, you folks get the picture, I'm sure. Alright. So that's Photoshop. I think comments show up to you, lag a couple seconds. Well, no, the stream is actually delayed. I mean, you can see my mouth flapping about something unrelated here anyway. So yeah, the stream is lagged. So you are seeing the comments show up way after you post them, but I'm seeing them when you post them. You're just going to get the answer in a delayed fashion. All right, get into it. So that is that. If there's no more questions about Photoshop, we'll move into the demo. So let's go to my videos. There's ink wash, and I'm gonna go bye-bye. Okay, maybe I can get the chat going in my other screen here. Yeah, so I will answer any questions via the chat during the demo video. So chat away, and I'll be back afterwards. Alright folks, this first step I was hoping to do with a staple gun, but I guess I'll make do with masking tape, perhaps. So the paper will be fine for doing this ink wash on. One problem you're going to run into though is that any water media is going to make the paper waffle or get bacony, get wavy as it dries. So to nip that in the bud, one thing you can do is really dampen your sheet of paper and let it sit like that for a few minutes, just to make sure that the paper gets saturated evenly. What this is doing is causing the paper to swell, which is why it gets wavy to begin with. So we're gonna let it swell first, and then we're going to tape it down so when it's trying to dry and constrict again, it'll be stuck, and it won't be able to do that, and it won't be able to get wavy. At least that's the idea. This normally doesn't work well with masking tape, but all the stores are closed because it's a, zombie virus plague. All right, so I'm gonna let that dry a bit and then tape it down, and then we'll get started. The paper has had a couple of minutes to soak in the water, and you want to smooth out the wrinkles from the center radially like this. All right. Now, again, if I had a staple gun, or rather staples for my staple gun, I would begin in the center and fan out from there. So let's do that with tape instead. Hopefully it'll work. So again, you want to smooth out from the center, and wait, I need to dry off this wood before it'll stick. I'm gonna run out of masking tape at this rate. All right, so this is gripping, isn't it? Entertaining television. So I'll just cut here and let you know when we're ready to get started on the drawing once the paper here has had time to dry out. All right, let us begin. I transferred my drawing from my source sketch. Whenever you're ready. Okay, there we go. So I drew this on Photoshop. I have a good idea of what my light should look like, and so let us recap the elements you need for this drawing. So first of all, you need the atmospheric perspective. You need the foreground positioning device, and you need to demonstrate successful use of textures in this particular assignment. And I'll explain what that means in a moment. But in order to fulfill step one, or objective number one, we need a very deep space that goes all the way back to the horizon, like in this sketch here, so that you're able to appreciate the atmospheric perspective again. All that means is that as things get further away in the distance, closer to the horizon, the lighter they get, because literally there's more atmosphere between you and that object. So that's how we humans have psychologically come to associate low contrast with distance, and high contrast, like the tree, with proximity. This is why you need the foreground positioning device, like my tree here. A foreground positioning device is an object that is so close in the foreground that it gets cropped off. That's basically all that means. So we need a deep space, so deep that it goes from the foreground positioning device all the way back to the horizon, so that we're able to appreciate the effect of atmospheric perspective. So let's set you up right here. Make sure I'm still rolling. Let's take a break. All right, we're rolling again. Now let's talk about ink wash. This is an ink wash assignment, wet media, hence the production in stretching the paper before we began. Notice how now that it's dried, it's completely flat because it wasn't able to, constrict as much as it wanted to. I recommend using a paper palette rather than a plastic palette, because plastic palettes cause the ink and the ink wash mixtures to pool and bead, and you're not able to appreciate what value you're actually mixing. Whereas with a paper palette, you can see it right there as you're mixing it. So give yourself a little well of raw ink. And then you also need your jar of clean water. All right, so let's get a brush wet and demonstrate the washiness of ink wash. So, perfect example, I know exactly which gray I'm mixing because I'm using a paper palette. At this point though, I'm gonna wanna lean in heavy with the core shadows in my foreground. You want to save your core shadows in this case for the foreground. You want contrast to be highest in this foreground positioning device. One thing about ink wash is that it always seems to dry a ton lighter than you laid it down. You can already see that happening right now. Since we already know we want this tree to be super poppy, I am going to lean in heavy with my core shadows because I'm going to have to go back in there and reinforce them anyway. Now, texture. What does that mean? That means we can't possibly paint every single leaf on this tree, just like we couldn't possibly draw every single particle of water vapor in that cloud. We're drawing the aggregate, not the pieces. Meaning, just like this cloud, oh, is it in the shot? Just like this cloud has clear shadow planes and light planes clearly divided by a clear terminator, we can look at this cloud. That's the same way you need to be looking at the leaves of the tree. Look at it as bunches. Bunches with clear shadow planes and clear light plane sides separated by some kind of broken up terminator. I told you the terminator is the most important aspect of light and shadow, or a value drawing, because it really is the most telling element of the shape of an object. So that's how we're going to get volume with the leaves of this tree, by looking at it as if it's a aggregate whole object with a clear shadow plane side and a light plane side. That's why we had to make sure that we establish a light key ahead of time. My light key is clearly coming from the right. That's where my sun is, because you can tell the light planes of all the objects are on the right side of the objects. You need to think about light rather than objects. In other words, what are the leaves on these trees? Nothing to me. All I'm looking at are the lights and the shadows. Does that make sense? Look for shadow patterns, not for objects, right? That means we are going to imply the leaves are there by blocking in our shadow planes with a round leafy texture, just like the bark on the tree. The shadows are blocked in with long linear strokes, not tiny little jittery leafy strokes. Does that make sense? In other words, this is still a value drawing like any other. We're worried about light plane and shadow plane and terminators. What's different in this case is texture. That's how we're going to imply what is there impressionistically, through texture. All right, let me demonstrate. That's what this is, right? A demo. Alright, sorry fam. I didn't know my camera was overexposed. But now maybe you see the drawing and the writing I've been pointing at this whole time. Alright, back into it. So I'm establishing clear terminators and shadow planes. Let me work my way on up the tree here. So again, I'm implying that there's bark by using long, vertical, linear strokes. Now you see I've watered down my ink just a bit to get these grays. Just remember that we need extreme contrast in the foreground and extreme analogous analogy? What? That's new terminology. What's the noun form of analogous? Analogy, right? That don't make sense. So flat contrast in the background, aight? Thought I'd let you know. Now that I'm dealing with these leaves in a little bit more greater detail, I thought you might, I guess see the way I'm filling in these textures. It's still very sketchy. And again, that's the beauty of ink wash, is you can slowly creep up on the drawing. Don't try and do the definitive stroke right off the bat. That ain't gonna happen. It's still a very mushy process. And we need to stay liquid like the wash. Liquid like the wash. Liquid like the... But you won't forget it now, will you? Heh. That's stuck in your brain. But as I'm blocking in this round leafy texture, I want my crescents to be, my crescent shadows to be, I guess, thickest in this direction. And I want the gap in my crescent to be pointing in that direction, if that makes sense. It does, because I said it. But does that make sense to you? Do you get it? Ask in the comments if you don't. Okay. Now, I wanted to tell you that I'm working on this foreground positioning device first because I don't want to accidentally wash over my light planes. Again, it's crucial that we keep the contrast cranked up to 11 on our foreground positioning device. So we want to make sure we have nice, pure, crisp, blank white of the paper highlights exclusively on our foreground tree. Okay, kids, let's get philosophical about drawing and paint. It is a two-dimensional medium. True that, true that. But there is another axis. Not a dimension, but another axis to the equation. It's called the spin axis. All right? So as you're using your brush, yes, you can go up, bug, be gone. Yeah, you can go up, you can go down, because it's 2D, of course, but you can also spin. You can twist your brush as you're applying the ink to get the crescents you want. I didn't want that crescent. Oh well. Notice I'm doing this clockwise twist as I go. Try it. You might like it. Here's one neat trick. I'm letting my brush dry out as I'm painting here. So rather than mixing a lighter gray, I'm just using the brush in more and more of a dry fashion. And that's working out perfectly in my bark, where I want it to be a rough, gritty texture. See how that works? It's neat. I like it. I tried it, and now I like it. Before I move on from this tree, I want to make sure that I lightly chisel out the upper edge of the light planes of these bunches. So you see I'm kind of like making cauliflower. See that? Little cauliflower. Now we'll move on before establishing any more to the light planes, because I know I want my core shadows to be super poppy in the foreground. As far as how light the light planes need to be is up for debate, because right now the entire background is white, which is going to manipulate the way we see values. So we do want to bring this picture up through these stages of value holistically. That's the only way to do it and get a consistent, harmonious picture. Texturing away. Notice how my strokes get shorter and more detail oriented only after I have a clear established idea of what the overall light plane shadow plane situation should be. But that is important to point out. Again, as with composition, you want to start out big. I started out by sketching out the mountains first, right? I separated the negative space from the rest of the landscape. The same is true with your brush strokes. You want to lead in with the big, broad brush strokes, only to graduate slowly to the tiny, short little brush strokes. You want those to be your last. If you start with the tiny, short little brush strokes, your overall contrast is going to be shot, meaning there's not going to be any consistency in your contrast throughout the picture, which is crucial. That's your light key, and that's your atmospheric perspective. It's a global contrast issue. So you want to make sure you're washing things in gradualistically with this ink wash. So this atmospheric perspective thing is a powerful skill to know. It's not just a global issue. You can also use it to really powerfully distinguish the volume of a single object. You see how this branch here I've left kind of a lighter gray than the branch from which it's originating from. That's helping it look like it's receding behind this branch. Now, as I said before, this atmospheric perspective thing has become associated in our psychology with contrast. So this is important for even abstract artists to know. What's going to happen when you compare a saturated bright color with a muted grayed down color, a neutralized color. You know, careful and controlled will get you nowhere. Explore your brush. Really push its limits, you know, because you'll get fun textures out of it. Let me try this a bit. Yeah, see? Aggregate your shadows that way. You might get some fun results. Woo. Slow down. Slow your roll there, Steve. You insane? Gonna kill somebody like that, Steve. Don't hurt him. All right, now that I've given the ink in the foreground some time to dry, I'm not done with this tree, by the way, but like I said, I want to develop the rest of my picture so that there are no surprises that I didn't anticipate earlier. So let's work on our background a bit, and this is a perfect opportunity to explain to you what the wet into wet technique is. It means to wet the page with clean water, let that soak in a bit, so that when you come in with the ink, it's going to diffuse and become blurry. So that's going to be perfect for the background, just as with our contour line drawing, where we used our line quality to describe distance. We can use focus in the same way. Our foreground tree is going to stay nice and crisp with nice clear brush strokes, while the background can be more blurry and diffuse. All right, you're fine on this wet terrain, right, Mr. Tablet? Mr. Tablet. All right, let's do some whooshes. Got a big gun here. Let's see. All right, so the darkest values are what I'm going to want to start with. So there's this mountain back here. I'm going to want to try really hard not to plow over my light planes from a tree, or my leaves, should I say. Let's get into the thick of it, right up in here. So to paint a thicket, we're just going to make long, random strokes that are all pointing up, the way branches would, or twigs and branches and grasses and such. Alright. But these are actually supposed to be trees in the distance, aren't they? Scaling is important in these landscape drawings. We think trees are big, we think mountains are big, so sometimes when we paint trees on mountains, they come out too damn big. So that's how we can use linear perspective to foreshadow our linear perspective assignment. We can use linear perspective to make sure that the scale of our trees in the background are consistent with the scale of the trees in our foreground. So our horizon has got to be somewhere in here, right? About a line like so. So if I establish a vanishing point, let's do it as far away from the tree as possible. Here's a vanishing point on the horizon. X marks a spot. I can draw a line to the base of the tree from that vanishing point. And this is a demo, so nothing matters. Hope you can see that line. And then to the top of it, just the middle, same location as about the trunk. So that would be about right here, right? Right. So that shows you, it should at least, how big a tree should be way off in the distance. So if I were drawing a tree on the opposite side of this water feature or the lake, immediately right here, then it would be approximately that big. See, poofy tree. That's where that tree lives. And then one of the trees on the mountain are going to be this tiny. That's where this little tree lives. Get it? So if this tree is supposed to be this small on this side of the water feature, then this thicket is grown a little overgrown. So let's stap it. The idea with the wet into wet technique is you wet the page, and generally you want to work from the background slowly towards the foreground. How about these blurry brush strokes? Diversify your vocabulary. Look at that. Isn't that nice? Just tap it. A little chaos in your landscape. It's important because landscapes are chaotic. This isn't a linear perspective drawing. Woo! That should be fun. Yay! When in doubt, slap it. Spank it. Again, make sure you don't plow over your light planes for your foreground tree. I got a little slap happy. As the paper dries, I may have to reapply my pre-wet. That can be done with a brush as well. Maybe I should demonstrate that. Jesus, is she wrangling piggies? Sydney, you are insane. And let's carve out some cliffs. Vaguely. Again, that's what's great about ink wash, is its sketchability. Check this out. I am finding that the cheaper the brush, the better suited it is for landscape ink washing. Look at this cheap gun. That's exactly the point. It's so jagged. It'll give me neat textures back here. Good stand-ins for trees. A good way to make a nice uneven tree line. Squeak. Ew. Yep. Now my tablet has some spats. And when in doubt, you can test it out on your palette. See? Again, paper palette wins. That's too dark. Paper palette for the win! Boink! Fun stuff. Explore the possibilities. Wait, we need a big tree to hide this thicket. Again, cauliflower. Think about where the shadows belong and where the light planes belong. So that's where this tree lives. Right? Yeah. Okay, now, as I was saying, we need some shadows down here. On the subject of light planes and shadow planes and terminators, cast shadows are so crucial in any painting, drawing, really. The important thing to know about terminators in cast shadows is that the cast shadows always connect to the terminators. Oh, damn, too sloppy. Anyhow, get sloppy with it. Not that sloppy. But the more randomness you can insert into this process, especially with a landscape, the more you might like the results. Now, there's a water feature here, so let's talk about reflections. You gotta imagine where the horizon line is, not where the shoreline is. Anyhow, imagine an inversion of everything flipped on the axis of the horizon. So that means that this mountain wouldn't begin down here where it would connect to the shore. It would begin right about here in the reflection. Yeah, would angle like so. See how that do? Neat how that do. Ain't it? Now, we are dealing with the water feature, so we should probably apply another pre-wet. There we goes. Always start your wash in a dark area so you can feel out exactly how dark the wash is. Now we're in, ooh, not watery enough. We're in a water feature, so we're gonna wanna make sure that our strokes are horizontal. Ooh, that's too much. Let's try that. That might be fun. You will get a different effect from the paper, depending on whether it's damp or flooded. So this is fun. I guess maybe let's try a cloud before I quit on this demo. Of course, this demo is not going to be a finished product. That's the nature of the beast. My sketch was a good representation of what this drawing would ultimately come out to be, but this should be enough to get you started. And when in doubt on these, you can always chase your washes with a little clean water to get them to diffuse that much more. Get them to bleed a little bit. Again, we're just looking for the shadow planes in it. Maybe there's a little cloud about here. Let's wash the rest of that in. And right here. That's something important to note, that your sky will not be white. We need to reserve the white of the paper for our most intense highlights, which are not easy to see here because this painting ain't gonna be finished. Look how nice that random ass brush works. Nice. I just want a little extra contrast here before I quit in the foreground, because that's where we need our contrast. Now notice also the direction of my brush strokes matter on these horizontal planes like the flat surface of the water and the ground here, I'm using very long horizontal strokes because that just visually compresses the vertical axis and exaggerates the horizontal axis to create the illusion of a flatter, more horizontally inclined plane. I'll rest my case. So, this should be enough to get you started. Now it's upon you to finish it. I'm done. We will talk about the Dropbox to submit these by and by. Bye-bye. Where am I? What the... Aw, damn. What the hell now? Ugh. Hello? Okay, you can hear me. That's great. Can't see me. Oh, did my camera turn off? I don't know. Okay, well, I guess you don't get to see me anymore, but you can hear me. So, finally, we need to look at our D2L. Let's see. There we go. Let's see. uco.edu. All right. There we go. I'm going to get into... All right, so any drop boxes for your final submissions will be posted in the news section. I don't know how else they're accessible through D2L. I'm sorry, I'm not I've never had to. I mean, obviously, I'm a studio art teacher. I haven't used D2L very much. But what I'm going to do with the rest of my day, I'm going to post the video you just saw, and might as well post the measuring video to our YouTube channel now. Any questions here? Okay, don't see any questions. So, let's see. Anything else worth mentioning? Okay, so next time on Thursday, we won't have a live lecture, but I will be online for you to communicate with me either through D2L or use my cell phone number. Remember, only use that during class, but that's a fine way to send me images and get my feedback. It could even be... No, I mean Thursday, next class that's coming up. It's just going to be an open lab day, a time for you to work on these ink washes and hit me up with any questions you might have. And then I'll let you know about Tuesday, whether or not we're doing a critique, and that all depends on whether or not I can figure out how to do a discussion on D2L. Nonetheless, this ink wash will be due before class starts next Tuesday, meaning the deadline on the Dropbox will be the start of class on Tuesday. Then I'll have all your work in that Dropbox for me to open up and discuss with you guys, maybe on a live YouTube stream. So, if there are no further questions, well, let me answer the ones that are here. So what are we doing Thursday then? Just mentioned. Go back and watch the video. So I'm going to get to work posting that demo, and you guys are still welcome to hit me up with any questions you have today. So I'll see you on Thursday, same time, same place.